So to emphasize, almost half of the country's drinking water is unsafe for consumption, and water losses jumped over the last 9 years. That Blue Drop report assessed 958 water supply systems across 144 water services. Two experts join us now to talk about it. Ayesha Laher, who is a water scientist and director of AHL Water, as well as Benoît Le Roy, South African Water Chamber CEO. Good evening to you both, and thank you very much for your time. Benoît, the report shows water infrastructure maintenance in steady decline between 2014 and 2019. It seems that it's a no-brainer that when that happens, water quality and management would be affected. What do you say?
Well, firstly, I want to say there's some good news in this, in that all's been laid bare for everybody to see what was hidden for nearly 10 years. So that's the good news. The bad news is that we're on a slippery slope downhill. Water flows downhill, and so does the story. And that it's unfortunate with water, it's a slow onset disaster, whereas with electricity and electrons, it's on off, and it happens pretty quickly. So the writing's on the wall, and in actual fact, there's no province that actually shines at all. And that half the water doesn't pass muster on the microbiological side is one thing, but nearly 70%, over 2/3, doesn't pass muster on the chemical quality side of things. But behind all this, there's what's carried out as an assessment of the actual infrastructure behind it, and that infrastructure is really in a poor state. And the non-revenue water that's reported through the No Drop report is showing that half of that precious water that we have caught from the rain, stored in our dams, pumped great distances over the Drakensberg and the likes, spent up to 15 Rand a cubic meter to actually treat at Rand Water, and half of it disappears in a defunct municipal distribution system. So, we have water shifting because of that. There's enough water around. It's a matter of we have to plug these leaks. The problems in Gauteng, just the water distribution system that will be completely gone within 5 years is about 50 billion Rand. That doesn't come through the fine print. Fixing up the potable water system, the production plants and the sewage plants, the number is relatively small. I know we talk billions easily. It's relatively small, but the distribution systems is the big number.
Benoît, I want to just pause you there, because you've covered almost the entire report, which is important because we do need that architectural view. But I also wanted to go down into some of the specifics, and I think what you talk about when you refer to no revenue water. For the rest of us who aren't experts, we think, well, what does that mean? But as you've described, it's precious water that should be available in our taps because it's gone through all of these steps, and yet it is essentially wasted and lost at great cost. Ayesha, the major metros like Johannesburg and Cape Town generally performed well. You heard Benoît say, well, actually no one's really performed well. But in general, water compliance tests are showing a severe regression in drinking water quality, something Benoît also referred to now, where almost half of the water supply systems achieved poor or bad microbiological water quality compliance. What does this mean?
So obviously we understand that poor water quality compliance means that the water is not safe to drink. What is quite important to understand is that the Blue Drop score that is given is not a score that tells you what is the water quality in the system. So if the score is higher, it's a combination of a number of KPI that is evaluated, not only water quality, but it includes water quality. So if a system has got a Blue Drop certification, that means it has got everything in place, including good water quality. But anything less than 80% mean a system may have unsafe water. And you cannot get the data about which particular supply system is actually failing from the Blue Drop report. So what is required, what I think is critical, Iman, is that we have the reports, we understand that more than half of the supply systems are not safe to drink. As a consumer, you need to go and investigate if your supply system is safe. And that is what is key. Using the Water Affairs' website, as Sean Phillips, the DG, advocated, to check if your water quality is safe. If it is not safe and you do not have a water quality advisory that is issued to you, then the most important thing, if it's microbiological compliance, is to ensure that there is alternative supply, or you should boil the water to safeguard your family.
Okay, well, talk to someone who might not be in a built-up community and they're concerned about this, their drinking water. So just describe what they need to do. They would collect it in something, what happens?
You can take that drinking water and boil it. So you boil it, get it to the point of boiling.
No,
and
I'm saying
thereafter it
before
will
we
kill
get
the
to that point, so you talked about that we need to investigate, right? If we want to know if the water is of good quality. So take us from that point on.
So the first step would be you would access the Department of Water and Sanitation's IRIS website. There is a mobile app as well, and we can share the link with you. Once you go onto that app, you put in the name of your suburb. And that will then bring up a picture that tells you, it's very simple, it's color coded. It will say blue, yes, it's okay. If it's any other color, obviously it's not safe.
All right.
That means the water that is coming in your system is not safe.
All right, so here's...
And that is one of that 49% that is not safe.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's practical and usable. Here's another concerning thing, Benoît, I want to bring it to you. So the Green Drop Assessment Report, which covers wastewater treatment works, that particular report or finding notes that 64% of wastewater treatment works are high or at critical risk of discharging untreated water into our rivers and environment. And we're all thinking probably deadly cholera outbreaks, such as we saw this year. How serious is this, and what are the imminent risks?
It's, I don't want to be alarmist, but it's a lot more serious than we think, because our systems are not designed to treat untreated sewage. They're designed to treat river water quality that complies to a general or special standard that the plants are regulated to. And in the previous Green Drop, we saw that 3% didn't comply. We see now, in actual fact, only 3% complied. Only 3% of potable water production plants have received a Blue Drop certificate. 97% don't comply. So the likelihood of your water not complying is very high, except if you're in some of the Gauteng metros, because parts of Tshwane are not okay. Hammanskraal is not okay. But eThekwini is okay, and Cape Town's okay. But, you know, I don't think the consumer should be the person having to worry about this. If I pay for water coming out of a tap, it has to be at the right volume, the right pressure, and the right price, and the right quality. That's what I do when I go to a shop. And so the average person is not going to be able, this is a bit more complicated than the Eskom app. You know, electrons are quite easy to control, whereas water molecules and what's in there is very different. So the contamination by the sewage plants is actually eco-suicide. Eco-suicide. We are causing a long-term catastrophe. I agree with the minister. It's not a crisis event, it's a catastrophe. It's an absolute catastrophe. We cannot allow the sewage plants not to operate. We pay for the sewage to be treated. Why aren't they being maintained and operated? We've hidden it for 9 years. Now it's all out. Now we must do it. So the minister has very little ammunition to do that, believe you me. It's the local authorities, the water service authorities, and the water service providers. Local government has the sole mandate to do that. There is no help coming from national government. It doesn't have the capacity. Now, GDP is generated at local government level, but so is water distributed, and so sewage have to be treated. We must just put the rule of law back in place, and as active citizens, what we can do is demand that we get our buck's worth out of everything. We need to be a lot more active, I think, but we also got to earn a living and do things, so we can't be active citizens, you know, all the time. But there are people who are doing that, and obviously the media, we're raising the profile. So we don't want to instill any panic, but the thing is, once the chain reaction starts, there is, you know, you can't just add more chemicals to make the sewage disappear. You have to treat that sewage at source. It's a very, very important part of the water cycle. I mean, that term eco-suicide, I think, is just kind of rattling around in my brain. As you say, this is a long-term catastrophe that is in the making. Sunlight's supposed to be the best disinfectant, but at this point, all we have is that information. And what I'm understanding is that if it's not acted upon urgently, we don't hold the right people to account, we will see a human disaster again, but probably at scale. Ayesha, given, and of course we have a limited amount of time to talk about this, which is always so frustrating, but given that we have this picture now, given that we know where the problems are, as Benoît was saying, we know where, and hopefully in our next interview we can bring some of those role players into the room to ask them what they will do. But what are some of the other ways that we can have as accessible and immediate steps that can be taken now to avoid a human disaster?
So I think the most important thing, a point that Benoît raised is very important. The wastewater treatment works is the key point. If we have wastewater treatment works that are dysfunctional and they discharge their effluent untreated into your rivers, most of those water treatment plants, even if they're operating well now, are going to be compromised, and we're going to be sitting with a situation like we had in Hammanskraal. Water treatment plants are not designed to operate as wastewater treatment plants. So what is going to happen is that if we don't start with the wastewater treatment works and protecting our resources, we're not going to get water treatment plants functioning and producing good quality water. So the water treatment works that are going to be working are also not going to be working anymore. One of the other points I'd like to make is that, we're talking about expanding the water treatment works to address the issues of sustainability, of security of supply. We in Gauteng have been experiencing numerous water losses, and we all know the frustrations associated with that. It's great that the water treatment plants of rainwater are going to be upgraded, and there's been allowance made for that.
Yeah.
But if your infrastructure is a leaking pipe, you can push more water through the leaking pipe, and all you will end up is more losses. You will not get more water on the opposite side that is coming through.
Sure.
So when we look at what's happening within local government, for our councillors or whatever, when we're pushing for the next year's elections, I think it's important to ask, what is your agenda for replacing the infrastructure in my city? Because if the infrastructure is not replaced, we will end up getting less water. And the thing is, the water quality is affected by this unreliable supply as well. So quality and quantity are also linked intricately.
Busy putting that in the margin of this list of questions that we need to put into our pre-election bank. Thank you to the pair of you. Really appreciate your time. Benoît, when you talk about, we should definitely have access to a certain volume and pressure, at this point, we're just grateful that there's actually water coming out of the tap. And that is a dangerous state to be in, because we're not holding, people to account and to the standard of that service delivery that it should be, that we should have access to. Thank you for your time. No doubt we'll have you back again. Ayesha Laher is a water scientist and director at AHL Water. Benoît Le Roy is the CEO of the South African Water Chamber.